This is the most dangerous person in Turkmenistan. Her name is Soltan Achilova, and she is a self-taught journalist who takes pictures of everyday life in her country and shares them with the world. She also tells stories about what she sees on the radio and to online publications. Her work records the daily struggles of the average person in her country. And the government of Turkmenistan is desperate to shut her up. We'll get to why in a moment, but first, here are some ways the Turkmen authorities have harassed Soltan and her family. They've tapped her phone. They've prevented her from accessing the internet. They've threatened her with criminal prosecution. They've stopped her from traveling abroad 3 times. They forced her son's business into bankruptcy and prevented him from seeing his family, events which eventually drove him to commit suicide. And late last year, they tried to poison her and then detained her in a hospital for 6 days against her will. Despite all of this, Soltan continues to do the one thing that Turkmenistan's dictatorship cannot stand. She tells the truth. And very few people in Turkmenistan dare to tell the truth. As of right now, Soltan is the only journalist living in the country who is openly criticizing the regime. This is because Turkmenistan is one of the most repressive countries in the world, arguably more repressive than North Korea, and virtually everyone else who dares to criticize the government hides their identity or, more commonly, operates from abroad. Put another way, this incredibly brave woman is, all by herself, Turkmenistan's entire public opposition. Most of you watching this video live in a society where just speaking the truth is not especially dangerous, at least at the moment. If you are like me, when you hear the story of someone like Soltan, you want to help, but finding a way to genuinely help them is difficult. But there is one very small way in which you and I can help Soltan, and we're both doing this right now. The reason Soltan has been prevented from traveling outside Turkmenistan 3 times is the regime is desperate for the world not to hear her story. They don't want you, and I mean you watching this video right now, to know who she is or why she is important. Just watching this video is a small act of defiance against a brutal dictatorship. It is a small way we can support Soltan and help her fight back. This video is also a fundraiser for the Committee to Protect Journalists, which helps journalists like Soltan all around the world. Near the video, you'll see a donate button where you can make a one-off donation. YouTube waives all fees, so 100% of what you donate goes to support the CPJ. And in case you're wondering, Soltan has helped me make this video. I was lucky enough to make contact with her, and we've been corresponding by email for several months. She's very keen for you to hear her story, and also delighted that this video will raise funds for the Committee to Protect Journalists. Before we discuss Soltan's specific situation any further though, let's have a quick overview of Turkmenistan itself. Turkmenistan became independent from the Soviet Union in 1991, and instead of having genuinely open elections, Turkmenistan's local Soviet-era leader, Saparmayat Niyazov, simply remained in power. Niyazov's 15 years as president were extremely strange. You may know some of the weirder things he did, like renaming the month of January after himself, or the $12 million golden statue of Niyazov that turned on a pedestal so it always faced the sun. But his rule was not just bizarre, it was also oppressive and corrupt. Turkmenistan enjoys vast natural gas deposits and other natural resources. Instead of using these to spread prosperity, Niyazov took control of them to enrich himself and his inner circle. Meanwhile, the vast majority of people grew poorer. Over 2 million Turkmen were forced to seek work abroad, where they earn low wages in poor conditions, and many have never returned. When Niyazov died in 2006, he was succeeded by one of his ministers, Gurbanguly Berdimuhamedov, who fairly quickly began to roll back some of Niyazov's most bizarre policies. This might make you think that Berdimuhamedov is a reformer. or at least not as brutal a ruler as Niyazov was. But if you thought that, you'd be wrong. If anything, conditions in the country today are far worse. And even though Berdimuhamedov seems pretty normal compared to Niyazov, he's still a weird guy. He lifts weights at his desk to the applause of his cabinet, and he fancies himself a bit of a pop star. The state-run media sings his praises 24/7, and Berdimuhamedov goes to great lengths to prevent anyone from raising any opposing views. For example, it's illegal to have political gatherings in Turkmenistan without permission from the government. And I don't mean public rallies that block off streets. Even a few people meeting in private is illegal. And even if an opposition group was allowed to form, there's not much they could do, as it's also illegal to criticize the government about anything. In 2025, Freedom House, which assesses the political rights and civil liberties of societies on a 100-point scale, gave Turkmenistan a score of 1. That's down from 2024, when Turkmenistan got a whopping 2 points. So, if anything, things are getting worse. Turkmenistan is now tied among independent countries, along with South Sudan, for last place. Worse than North Korea, you might ask? Yes, Freedom House gave the Hermit Kingdom a score of 3 times as many points as Turkmenistan. Transparency International, which ranks countries by the perception of corruption, currently lists Turkmenistan in 165th place out of 180 countries. That's tied with the Taliban regime in Afghanistan. And in the World Press Freedom Index, compiled by Reporters Without Borders, Turkmenistan ranks 174th out of 180 countries. These country rankings are really bad. So bad there can be little doubt about how dire things are for the people of Turkmenistan. But they can at best only give a simple overview of the situation. For some real-life detail, let's return to Soltan's story. For most of her life, Soltan lived a normal life in Ashgabat, Turkmenistan's capital. Before independence, she worked as an accountant in the Ministry of Trade for 27 years. Not long after independence, her job was eliminated, and she retired from work to focus on her home and family life, where there was a lot going on. After securing some land, her husband and one of her sons spent 10 years building a new 2-story family home. And when I say they built it, I mean they built it. They poured the foundation and they laid the bricks. And for very understandable reasons, the family was very proud of its new home. But, like it was for a lot of people in post-independence Turkmenistan, times for Soltan and her family were also very difficult. For example, in 2000, the government denied Soltan the pension benefits her decades of work entitled her to. She fought for years to get what she was owed, but was ultimately unsuccessful. This was a difficult moment, but it was also Soltan's first experience fighting the system, and it turned out she was good at it. But then, in 2006, her family was dealt a much bigger blow. One day, while she was away from home, a large crew of people, including some soldiers, arrived at her house with heavy equipment. They were there as part of a project led by President Niyazov to, quote, standardize the look of the city. They forced their way into the house, threw all of her family's possessions out onto the street, and leveled her house to the ground. The home her family had built was gone, and much of the family's possessions were lost or stolen. Citing a technicality, the state refused to pay Soltan's family any compensation. Just as she'd fought for her pension, Soltan fought for what her family was owed, knocking on every door she could find. After a full year of failing to get any justice for what had happened, she decided to become a journalist. Soltan, then in her late 50s, had no journalism experience, so she had to learn to do everything from scratch. She bought a camera and began taking pictures of the everyday struggles of people like her, and she became a correspondent for the Turkmen service of Radio Free Europe, known as Azatlık Radyosu. For average people in Turkmenistan, just taking photographs in public is nearly impossible, and anyone who tries this can face criminal prosecution. Because of this, as Soltan explains, every picture taken in our country matters. One reason they matter is the Turkmen state wants total control over the media. The mere existence of an independent perspective of the world, even just simple scenes from daily life, is a threat to that control. Another reason these photos are so important is they show how difficult life can be for the average person in Turkmenistan. Officially, there is almost no poverty in Turkmenistan. Just 0.2% of the population supposedly lives below the poverty line. This is an incredibly low number that's much lower than virtually any other place on the planet. Yet Soltan's pictures tell a different story. They make Berdimuhamedov and his regime look like liars. There's something else that makes this decision to become a journalist so brave. In 2006, the same year Soltan's house was demolished, an Azatlık Radyosu journalist named Ogosapar Muradova was arrested and thrown in prison and then died mysteriously a few months later. So, from the very moment she decided to start telling the truth about Turkmenistan, Soltan was acutely aware of the risks she was taking. As well as working for Azatlık Radyosu, Soltan also became a contributor to Hronika Turkmenistana, an online newspaper that operates from abroad, and she has worked exclusively for Hronika since 2018. Google Translate does a decent job at translating Turkmen, or at least it seems to, so if you'd like, you can go and check out Soltan's work on the Hronika website, when it's not under attack from the Turkmen authorities, of course. You might wonder if Soltan's work actually accomplishes anything, though. Can a regime as corrupt and oppressive as Berdimuhamedov's really care about someone like Soltan, or what pictures she shares, or what stories she tells? Well, it's pretty obvious they do care. Here's one example. In June 2024, villagers from the Labap region in northeast Turkmenistan, an area that relies on irrigation from the Amu Darya River for agriculture, called Soltan to tell her that constant interruptions from the water and electricity supplies, as well as poorly maintained canals, were making it impossible for them to grow cotton, their main source of livelihood. Soltan reported this story on the Hronika website, and on the very same day her story appeared, workers arrived in the village and fixed the electricity supply. So, yeah, you can bet Berdimuhamedov's stooges are reading what Soltan writes. In 2021, after 15 years of fearless work documenting corruption and oppression, Soltan was named a finalist in the Martin Ennals Award for Human Rights Defenders by the Martin Ennals Foundation in Geneva. She was set to travel to Geneva to be honored and to meet her fellow finalists, but the Turkmen government refused to let her leave the country, citing COVID restrictions. And okay, this was at the height of the pandemic and lots of countries were restricting travel at the time, so perhaps this was reasonable. But in 2023, the Martin Ennals Foundation invited Soltan for a second time to attend their annual event, but the authorities refused to grant her permission. She got a ticket and showed up at the airport anyway. According to her, just as she was about to board, quote, "A Turkmen immigration service officer damaged our passports right in front of our eyes and did not let us on the plane." But if there's one thing you can say for sure about Soltan, she is determined. In the autumn of 2024, just a few months ago, she tried to go to Geneva a third time. And this is wild. 2 days before she was set to depart, Soltan was told by an official she would not be allowed to travel. She insisted she would try anyway. Not long after this, a man came to her house to get her help with a problem he was having with the authorities. This was a completely routine event for Soltan. As in the story about the villagers from Labap, people from all over Turkmenistan turned to her for help on a regular basis. She served the man tea and bread, and he left behind some snacks, which Soltan left out on her table for others to take. Later that day, another visitor ate some of the snacks, and 15 minutes later, she had to be taken to the hospital. This was pretty obviously an attempted poisoning, but despite this, the woman was transferred to a hospital for treating infectious diseases. Soltan pressed ahead with her travel plans, however, and according to her, quote, "When we were about to board the plane, 4 special service officers in white coats attacked us and forcibly took us to the infectious diseases hospital in an ambulance. They said the woman who fell ill in my house had an infectious disease and we had been in contact with her. They kept us locked up for 6 days until the ceremony in Geneva ended." It was not long after this that I first heard Soltan's story on a podcast called The Mejlis that covers politics in Central Asia. I immediately realized that I'd like to make a video about her story and began reading everything I could about her. I contacted a journalist to confirm the timeline of events, and she, much to my surprise, actually put me in touch with Soltan. This was way beyond my expectations. And so, we've been exchanging emails since that day. One of the questions I asked Soltan was why she wasn't afraid. If I was in her situation, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have the guts to do what she does. She answered, "I am not afraid of being a journalist in Turkmenistan because, since 2000, I have been a victim of injustices myself. These actions, the lawlessness in the country, and the suppression of people's rights are the reasons why I continue to be a journalist." Soltan says she isn't afraid, and I believe her, but it seems pretty obvious that Berdimuhamedov and his cronies must be afraid of Soltan. I don't know how else to explain the fact that, after all these years, she's still alive. Soltan confirmed to me that despite 2 decades of speaking out, she has yet to even be charged with a crime, and she has no explanation for it either. In fact, no prominent official has ever even mentioned her name in public. When I asked about this, she said, quote, "They do not have such courage. They talk among themselves in secret meetings. They discuss their crimes they will commit against me, but they do not make it public. All the evils in this country are discussed secretly." Another question I asked Soltan is what she wanted the world to know about Turkmenistan. Here's what she said. "I want the world to know the truth about the Turkmen people. While the country has immense natural wealth, the common people live in extreme poverty, with 2 to 3 million people working abroad like slaves to survive. The country's wealth is in the pockets of the Berdimuhamedovs and their many allies, while half the population cannot even eat bread. No one knows how many Turkmen have been left homeless in foreign countries, how many families have been broken up, how many children have become orphans. No one cares about this situation. On the contrary, they create various obstacles for those who want to go abroad, drown the population, and cause their deaths. Journalists like me who want to speak out about these things are either imprisoned or killed, and even activists who live abroad and write about the country's shortcomings on their websites are deported and brought back to the country where they disappear without a trace." Soltan is not hopeful about her country's future. Turkmenistan's rulers are rarely put under any international pressure because, as she puts it, foreign leaders, quote, "need Turkmenistan's gas, oil, cotton, and other resources. They are not interested in the fact that the rights of the Turkmen people are being suppressed, and that is why the Turkmen authorities continue to do what they have done. Before I understood this situation, I had hope, but now I have no hope. But I want the world to know my story." I also want the world to know Soltan's story, and if you've watched this far into the video, I think you probably want this too. The good news is that just by watching this far, you've already succeeded. You're another person who knows about Soltan and what she's up against every day. If you want to do more, please share this video and consider making a donation to the Committee to Protect Journalists, an organization that supports journalists who face persecution like Soltan. And remember, though you and I might want the world to know Soltan's story, you can be sure that Gurbanguly Berdimuhamedov definitely does not want this to happen. So sharing this video or just telling someone about Soltan is a small act of defiance against one of the very worst people in the world. I don't know this for sure, but I suspect that, later this year, Soltan will make a 4th attempt to fly to Geneva to attend the Martin Ennals Award ceremony, where I hope, as a former finalist, she will get to stand on stage and get the recognition she deserves. And I hope that when she makes this 4th attempt, that thousands of people around the world will be focused on Turkmenistan, looking closely to see if Berdimuhamedov has the gall to deny her the right to travel a 4th time. I know I'll be watching, and I hope you'll join me. Just before I go, here's a bit more on the Committee to Protect Journalism. The CPJ was founded in 1981 as a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization with the mission of defending journalists who report the news despite facing tremendous risks. Over the years, its advocacy has helped win dozens of positive legal reforms, convictions in scores of journalist murders, and the release of hundreds of jailed journalists. The CPJ has also provided direct assistance to thousands of journalists all over the world. If you want to contribute to the CPJ, just look for the donate button. YouTube waives all its fees, so 100% of what you give will be sent to the Committee to Protect Journalists. Thank you, and I'll see you guys in the next video.